Class 6 Physics Chapter 3. The topic Friction. Children, today you will learn about the force of friction. What is friction? The force which slows down the motion of a moving body in contact with the surface of another body is called the frictional force. Look at the video over here. Here you can see the rider falls down from the bicycle and comes to a stop after a certain time. Why does he stop? Why doesn't he continue to slide on the ground? Because his body and the road on which he is sliding, they are opposing each other. So this opposing force is the frictional force, and as such he is stopped by this frictional force. So friction always opposes motion. As you can see in this figure also, the boy is trying to push a box. So this is the force which is applied by the box, which he is trying to move in one direction, but the friction is happening in the opposite direction. So he has to push harder so that he can move the box. Effects of friction. There are certain points which you must understand. Friction opposes motion. If we push a heavy box with a little effort, we find that the box does not move. It is because of some opposing force between the box and the ground. We need to push the box harder so that the box starts moving. Similarly, if we roll a ball on the ground, it gradually slows down and stops after covering a certain distance. This opposing force, which is happening over here between the ball and the ground, is the force of friction. Similarly, when the box is kept on the ground, the lower surface of the box and the ground are in contact. So, they are opposing each other, and this is the force of friction. If we stop pedaling a cycle, it slows down and after traveling a certain distance will stop, because the force of friction between the bicycle tires and the road will not allow the cycle to move any further. So it comes to a stop. Again, to start the bicycle, you have to exert a force on the pedal which must be greater than the force of friction between the tires and the road. The second point for the effects of friction. Friction always acts in a direction opposite to the direction of motion. Now, look into this picture. The boy is pushing this table. Now, the force with which he is pushing is going in one direction. Now, the lower surface of the box and the ground are in contact with each other. So, when the boy is pushing in one direction, the force of friction is happening in the opposite direction. So, friction always acts in a direction which is opposite to the direction of motion. Friction produces heat. A very simple example. When you feel very cold, you rub your palms together. What happens when you rub your palms together? Your hands become warm. This is because of friction. Both the palms of your hand have rough surface. So as such, when you are rubbing it against each other, it produces heat and as such becomes warm. Similarly, due to friction, the moving parts of a machine get heated up. As it gets heated up, so wear and tear happens in the machine. Even in ancient days, how did the people used to produce fire? They used to produce fire by rubbing the two stones together, where flints used to come out and they could light a fire. Similarly, another example is you take a matchbox and you take a matchstick. You have to rub the matchstick on the side of the box where it is very rough. Now, because of this frictional force which is happening over there between the stick and the side of the box, it produces heat, and as such the matchstick is lighted up. The last point, friction causes wear and tear. You must have noticed that the tires of a bicycle or a car, they gradually wear out when they are continuously used. This is because of the friction between the tire and the ground. Look at this. Here you can see the person is trying to move a round object on the ground. Now the ground is very rough and the round object also has rough surface. The same thing happens with the tire and the ground also. The tire has a rough surface, whereas the ground also has a rough surface. When continuously the tires are moving on the ground, then it causes wear and tear. Because of the frictional force, the tire surfaces get worn out. Factors affecting the force of friction. Smoothness of the surface. The force of friction is more between rough surfaces and less between smooth surfaces. Now, a simple example. If some oil spills out on the floor and you try to put your feet on it, you feel very slippery. But you put some sand on the floor and try to put your feet on it, you will find that it is rough. So, the force of friction will be more in rough surfaces and less between smooth surfaces, because the oil here makes the surface smooth, and as such the undersurface of your feet and the ground becomes smooth enough for you to slide down. Second point, nature of medium in which the body moves. A solid, liquid or gas, they exert force of friction on a moving body. Now, the force of friction between two solids will be more than the friction between a solid and liquid or a solid and gas. Take the example of a box, a heavy box. When you are trying to slide the box on the surface, do you think it will be easier for you to slide? No, because the ground is solid and the box is also solid. So, both their surfaces in contact will oppose each other, and as such, it will be difficult for you to move that heavy box. But when you put your hand into water and try to move your hand in the water, you will find that easily you can move your hand through the water. This is because your hand, a solid object, and the liquid, they have lesser force of friction. So it becomes easier for you to move your hand through water. You try to move your hand in the air. You can very easily move your hand in the air because the gases and the solids, they have negligible force of friction between them. The third point, the weight of the moving body on the surface is greater. That is, greater the weight of the moving body on a surface, more is the force of friction on the body by the surface. That is, you take two boxes. One is a big one and a heavy one, and you take a small one. Which one will be easier for you to move? Of course, the smaller one. because the smaller one will require less amount of force to move on the ground because it has less weight. So the force of friction acting on it will be less. Whereas the bigger box, which has a greater weight, will be difficult to move on the surface because the force of friction will be more because of the greater weight. So children, you will learn about the different factors or the different kinds of friction in your next video.